You just buy a new car?
Leased it. $299 a month, couldn't resist.
Well, let's run the numbers on that to make sure you didn't just get got.
Stop wasting money on that dumb shit and instead put it in investment. I know it's tempting. You'll spend it and be broke again.
Welcome back, guys. It's your bro Taylor.
And your bro Ryan.
And today we're talking about whether or not leasing or buying might be the better option for you. Now, let's make sure we're on the same page about what each one actually is. How buying works is you pay the full purchase price, either upfront in cash or financed through a loan. And at the end of it, you own the vehicle. It goes on your personal balance sheet as an asset. So after you're done making those loan payments, you own it free and clear. You can sell it, modify it, drive it 200,000 miles, let it sit there in your driveway. Nobody really cares because it's yours.
Now, what exactly happens when you lease a vehicle? So when you lease a vehicle, you are paying the depreciation of the vehicle during your lease term, not the vehicle itself. The dealer estimates what the car will be worth at the end of the lease, aka the residual value. You pay the difference between the purchase price and that residual value, plus interest, called the money factor, plus fees. Yes, they try and make it as confusing as possible. At the end of the lease, you return the car back. You either buy it at its residual price or you walk away and either have no car or start the whole lease process over again. At that point, you never own anything. You never accumulated equity. And again, you just have to decide, do I still want a car? Okay, yes. Now I either have to lease again or buy that car or buy a different car. You're kind of back into figuring out how to spend money.
Yeah, you can basically think of it as buying a car is purchasing a depreciating asset, while leasing is essentially paying a subscription to use that depreciating asset. Neither one is inherently good or bad, but let's dive into the numbers to figure out what would work best for your particular circumstance. Jumping right into it, let's start with a very classic car, 2024 Honda Accord. Everyone knows the classic Honda models and everything, so it's a very realistic, nothing too flashy, but also not a beater, because I mean, you're not really going to find a beater car to lease. So let's say this Accord has a $30,000 MSRP. Looking at the lease term, let's say it goes for 36 months, and your quote-unquote down payment or your contribution to the cap cost is between $2,000 and $3,000, which puts your monthly payment around $354 to $362 a month. So in the end, the total you paid over the entirety of the term is anywhere between $14,700 and $16,000, including your initial down payment. Now, what do you have for all this at the very end of this term? Nothing. Like Ryan said at the beginning, you're back in the process one way or another. Another thing to note, for typical car leases, they do put a cap on the mileage you're supposed to use because they're trying to get their best estimate of the residual value, so they need to know or put a limit on exactly how much you're going to use the car. And if you try and exit a lease term early, there are typically very significant fees associated with that, so be wary of that.
So now let's look at buying. So most people don't go super short like a 36-month term on a loan, but it's definitely available, and a lot of people do recommend it in personal finance, but the majority of people go 60 plus on a loan. So we're going to look at a 60-month loan, and you put down roughly 10 to 20% or $3,000 to $6,000. That brings your monthly payment to $475 to roughly $535 at a 7% interest rate. As you can tell right there, yes, as every car dealer will sell you on a lease, your monthly payment for buying is higher. It does cost you more essentially per month. However, let's keep going through the numbers and you'll see why it's a big difference to buy. So your total paid over term for buying the car is $31,500 to about $38,000, including your down payment. However, what you have at the end is a car. And in this case, a car that's worth $15,000 to $18,000. So if you take that into account, your net cost is actually about $13,500 to about $23,000, which changes things a lot. You're much closer to that lease total. Plus, there's no mileage limit. You own the vehicle. And if you did want to exit early, you could either sell or trade it at any time. So there's much less limitation and much less restrictions. You own that vehicle.
Yeah, and I mean, when you look at it in a more day-to-day or month-to-month in this case scenario, yes, the lease does look more inviting. Yeah. And like Ryan said, that's what the salesman is going to point out. But you need to zoom out a little bit and look long-term. In the end of buying a car, even though it's a longer term, you'll own an asset. You know, Leasing, you're in an endless cycle until you finally decide to either, I guess you could walk everywhere, or actually buy a car. And another thing to note is once you've paid for the car and own it outright, your monthly costs are really just any maintenance and gas fees that are associated. The lease is never going to get that low. So again, a more zoomed out view, you can see that over time, your average payment per month could easily end up being cheaper by owning a car.
So we kind of compared the obvious direct cost of a lot of these. However, there are a lot of hidden costs and fees associated with a lease. So let's look at a few of those so again, you don't get got. So we already talked about the first one that's the most obvious is the mileage overage fee. Most leases cap you at 10 to 15,000 miles per year. Overages typically cost 15 to 30 cents per mile. So if you drive 5,000 miles over on a 3-year lease at, let's say, 25 cents a mile, that's an additional $1,250 extra bill when you turn in that car that you probably didn't even expect. So if you commute, go on a lot of road trips, drive a good distance for work, there's a good chance you run over that annual mileage that's set.
And another little gotcha they throw in is one you may or may not expect, but of course, the dealer is going to inspect the car once you turn it in, and anything beyond standard wear and tear, they're going to charge you for. A lot of times these bills can run from $500 to $2,000, and for a lot of people comes as a surprise. Now, you can buy wear and tear protection up front, but again, that's another cost.
Another thing to be aware of, but if a leased car is totaled, your insurance pays the car's current market value. And a lease company wants the remaining payments. And if those two numbers don't match up, which they often don't the earlier you are into the lease or the loan, you owe the difference out of pocket. Gap insurance would cover that gap. Most lease agreements require this, and when you're buying a car, almost every bank offers this. Typically, me personally, I don't ever really get it because I make sure when I buy my car used that I put enough down and what it's worth and I get a good deal on it so that all those numbers, there is no gap. If I totaled it literally when I drove it off the block, then there'd be nothing to worry about. Insurance would still pay it because the value's higher. Versus in this case, you're buying almost essentially a new car, driving it off, it depreciates significantly right away, so you're in the hole that whole time until you get down to the point where the value of it matches what you have on the loan. You probably will want or need gap insurance. And while again, it's offered on both, one requires it. That's why we're saying it's another gotcha, because it's another fee that's not in the big printout until the end. Oh yeah, you also need gap insurance.
Yeah, and another gotcha is what's referred to as the money factor. Essentially, dealers quote leases and monthly payments, not interest rates. So the money factor is the lease equivalent of an APR, but expressed as a tiny decimal, like 0.00125. Now, multiply it by 2400 to get the approximate APR equivalent. For example, if the money factor is 0.0025, that's equivalent to about a 6% APR. Always ask upfront for that money factor and do the conversion for yourself, because if the dealer's not willing to give you that number, they're hiding something.
And you can kind of see how they're making this complicated, not easy comparison, not easy math, so that they can go, oh, but if you just look at the easy numbers, monthly payment, it's a way better deal.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's going to be like 0.0001. Oh, let me care about that a whole lot, you know? But it's a much more microscopic view of a bigger picture. So if you do blow it up to more layman's terms, so to say, you're like, oh, wow, actually, this is very impactful.
Now, I know we kind of dumped on the warnings for the lease and showed how leasing is kind of bad, but at the same time, there are scenarios that it does make sense. So let's look at a few of those scenarios. So for one, just quick, if you tend to drive very low mileage like myself, you're driving consistently lower than 10 to 12,000 miles a year, then yeah, maybe leasing is for you. Maybe you almost always around that 2 to 3 year mark are looking to get a new car. You're like, I'm kind of bored of this one, and you're always out shopping, or I want this new feature. Leasing is probably for you because like we said earlier, the math makes more sense on buying a car the longer you have it. And if you use the car for business and can deduct the lease payments, this changes the math significantly. Definitely consult a CPA on that. That's definitely not advice by any means, but this can make that lease make more sense. The last, maybe rare but available option is if the manufacturer is offering a subsidized lease for the residual value. That could be handy because basically you're making that lease cheaper and you're coming less out of pocket, which means to buy the car, you have to hold it even longer to make it make sense over the lease. So that can be available, but how do you know you're getting a good deal? So there's kind of two conditions you want to look for as a rule of thumb. You want to make sure the money factor is at or below the current buy rate. And two, you want to make sure the residual value is high relative to the MSRP. 60+% for a 36-month lease is actually very good.
Yeah, so to Ryan's point, there are some instances in which it may work for you. But on the flip side, when might buying work better is kind of what we've been talking about. You just don't really want any restrictions and you plan on holding it for a longer term. You know, if you feel like tinting your windows or doing all these modifications, or you do a lot of cross-country trips, or like, I'm going to put 50,000 miles on it in a year, then you probably want to avoid leasing because, again, they have all those gotcha moments where like, oh, you went this far, we're going to charge you an extra load of money just for doing that. So, again, there's just fewer restrictions when you own a car outright. And again, you know, you plan on holding it long term, the monthly payments work out to be cheaper over an extended period of time.
And honestly, those all check the box for me. Longer road trips. I don't want to be limited on miles to go. Oh, it's coming up to the end of the year. I got to be careful. I don't want to drive anymore. Everybody stay home. And I love going on road trips, cross-country stuff. So that already, I got to buy a car. I love the best deal. So trust me. I'm like, if I hold it 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, and it's this much per year versus this one I only get 2 to 3 years and it's endless, yeah, that's not going to work for me either. And I love to like mess with my own car at the same time, so upgrade the stereo, all stuff like that. So I'm limited to that. I'm basically driving a rental car for a long period of time. Well, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you got value out of this. We very much hope you learned, or at least helped you make a decision on should I lease or should I buy. Us personally, we'll probably be buying for a good long while, but feel free to ask us any question in the comments. We'd love to have that feedback from you guys. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for next week's video.
Stop wasting money on that dumb shit and instead put it in investment. I know it's tempting. You'll spend it and be broke again.